A kitchen can have the most beautiful finish in the world, the gorgeous stone, the custom cabinets, a showpiece range, and still be exhausting to cook in. And here's the surprising part. The kitchen that feels effortless, the ones where cooking is a pleasure instead of a fight. They're the ones with the right layout. The layout is the bone of your kitchen. You get it right, and everything else in the room gets to shine. You get it wrong, and no amount of beautiful stone will ever fix it. So today, let's design a kitchen layout that actually works. If we haven't met, I am Ariana Adireh Anderson with ARIID Group. I design beautiful homes and my team builds them. And of everything I do in the kitchen, the layout is the decision very important. It's the one you will feel every single day for the next 20 years. It's the difference between a kitchen you love to be in and the one you actually dread. And the wonderful thing is, a great layout isn't about only square footage or a budget. It's about understanding how a kitchen actually is used and designing around it. Now, I stood in tiny kitchens where it's a joy to cook in, and enormous ones that you actually want to leave. The difference was never about the size, it was how it was planned. So let's get into how. Let's start by throwing out the old rule. Now, for decades, the kitchens were designed around a working triangle, a path between a sink, a stove, and a refrigerator. It's not wrong, and it still is a useful starting point. But it was invented back in 1940 when one person cooked alone in a closed-off kitchen. It's not how we live now. Now, the kitchen is the biggest room in the house. We cooked together, we added dozens of appliances the triangle never imagined. Our microwave, coffee machines, toasters, wine refrigerators. So the way I design today is around zones. 5 of them. A place to store, a place to prep, a place to cook, and a place to clean up. And of course, a place to gather. When each zone has its own home, its own space to be in, the whole kitchen flows. And everyone can be in it all at once without feeling crowded. The triangle asks one question. How far apart are 3 things? Zones asks a better question. Does every task in the kitchen has a proper home? Now, of all these zones, the one people underestimate the most is the prep zone. This is where real work happens in the kitchen. The chopping, the mixing, the actual cooking. And it needs generous, uninterrupted counter space right between the sink and the stove. Planners have measured this for decades. They recommend a real landing area besides each key spot. Something like 18 to 24 inches of clear, uninterrupted space next to the sink and at least a foot between the cooktop. So there's always somewhere to set that hot pan down. And honestly, when a client cooks seriously, I go well past those minimums because the minimum is where kitchen stops being frustrating and not where it starts being pleasurable. When we give a prep zone enough room, cooking stops feeling cramped and rushed. It starts feeling calm and, for some of us, even enjoyable. What that single stretch of clear, generous prep counter does more for a kitchen than it works. And a detail inside the prep zone that people never think about it until they cannot live without it. Keeping that main stretch of the countertop clear of things that would creep into, like a knife block, utensil stand, maybe even a mixer. Each has somewhere better to live in. So I plan a home for those elements from the start. When the prep countertop's only job is for prep, it could feel even twice as big as it measures. A related little detail that people always feel absence of, landing space between big appliances, right next to the refrigerator. We want a stretch of a countertop to set our groceries down as we unload them, right besides the oven, where especially where you can have a heat-proof surface for that hot roasting pan the moment it comes out. Without those landing spouts, we end up doing that awkward little shift, holding something heavy or hot with nowhere to put it. With them, the whole kitchen feels like it was thinking, one step ahead of us. This is a small thing that costs almost nothing to plan and, well, actually impossible to add later on. At the same time, let's keep the core of a kitchen tight because there's actually is a sweet spot. The three hardest working spots in our kitchen are sink, stove, and a refrigerator. And they should be close enough that it doesn't feel like it's a marathon to walk between them, but not so close where they're crowded into each other. The old guideline still holds beautifully here. Each leg of path wants to be somewhere between 4 to 9 feet, and the whole loop between all three, no more than 26 feet in total. When the core is tight and comfortable, cooking has a natural rhythm. And a few easy steps between each task, the kitchen feels effortless without even feeling small. This is the one place the old triangle still genuinely holds its value. We won't throw it out completely. We fold it inside a zone and let it size the core. Here's a way of thinking about the layout that changes a lot of things, and it's simple. Design the kitchen in the order you actually use it. Now, let's think about the journey of a meal. Groceries come in, now they go to a storage. They come out of the storage into a refrigerator and pantry and then to a prep zone. From the prep zone, they move into the cooktop, where to be cooked. From there to the table to be served. And finally, things come back into the sink and the dishwasher to be cleaned. When the kitchen is laid out in that natural sequence, store, prep, cook, serve, clean, we move through it in that smooth, logical flow instead of crisscrossing the room all the time. When a client tells me that their old kitchen just felt wrong and they could never explain it, it is almost always what was missing. The parts were all there, they were just designed in the wrong order. Store zone deserves real thought too, because this is where calm of a kitchen begins. A good pantry, preferred a bank of tall cabinets or a walk-in, is a single most requested features in the kitchens right now. And there's a good reason. In the recent House Kitchen research, pantry storage came on top, with the pantry cabinets in nearly half of renovated kitchens. When there's generous organization in home for that food and bulked small appliances, the working countertop gets to stay clear and the whole kitchen feels calm. So I plan storage to actually hold your life, not just to look full of moments. And I think about the kind of storage each of these things want. A deep drawer for pots, so you can pull them out instead of crawling down in the cabinets drawer trying to pull things out. A narrow pantry pullouts for oils and spices right next to the stove. A kitchen with enough of the right storage stays beautiful on an ordinary Thursday, not just when you're hosting a dinner party. Now, let's make sure there's enough room to move around because clearance, there's a lot of beautiful kitchens that go wrong because of that. The walkway in the kitchen needs real width. For a single cook, I want at least 24 inches of clearance space in the main working island. With 2 people, or if there's a walkway runs between someone and the stove, closer to 48. And around the island, that same 42 to 48 inches of clearance on all sides applies. So no one feels like they have to squeeze by. It might sound like a lot, but this is exactly the space that makes a kitchen generous and easy to be in instead of tight and stressful. And remember to measure the clearance with drawers open because 48 inches in the island stops being 48 inches the moment the dishwasher is opened. Generous clearance are one of the true luxury you will feel every single time you're in that room. Now, with right planning, it is everything. And let's design for more than one cook. It's how most of us actually live. So much of the joy of kitchen is in sharing. One person at the stove, the other at the sink, someone setting out a cheese board on that big, beautiful island. The layout build out for single cooks makes all of that constantly negotiation. So I plan for 2 all the time. The second prep area, a space that allows in the island wide enough for people to work back to back. And critically, I keep the main traffic path, the route that people take to grab drinks or head to the back door, out of the cook's working core. When the through traffic does not cut across the prep zone or the cooking zone, the person that's cooking gets to stay in their own flow. And the kitchen stays calm even when it's full of people. Let's give a cleanup zone some care as well. It's a part of the kitchen where we specially spend a lot of our time, a place where the dishwasher is immediately next to the sink, so scraping and unloading and loading is one easy pivot, not the drip across the room. And I put it on the side that matches the person who's actually cooking. The trash and the recycle tucked are also a pull-out. They could be hidden but close by. Identical spots, so sorting happens in seconds. And in a larger kitchen, I love a second, smaller prep sink for someone that can rinse and work while the main sink handles all the cleanup. Now, let's talk about where the island fits in all of this. The island and the layout needs to be decided because it's not just a beautiful object. It needs enough clearance space, again, around 42 to 48 inches. So it's never feels closed off. It has a flow. And I think carefully about the job that the island is doing. What is its primary purpose? Is it a prep surface? Then you want it to be closer to the sink and the cooktop. Or is the island there for gathering? In that case, I would push it towards the living room side. The best island does both things, but it also needs to have its main purpose. And if people are going to sit behind the island, I plan for an overhang. The height so the seats are genuinely comfortable and your knees can have enough room underneath the ledge. Now, placed right, the island organizes the whole kitchen around it. Placed wrong and is beautifully becomes an obstacle where everyone walks around it. We'll do much more deeper talk about the island. I actually have an entire video dedicated to it. So subscribe so you don't miss that episode. Now, here's a small principle that makes a kitchen feel intentional. Storing things where you actually use them. That sounds obvious, but so few kitchens actually do it. Pots and pans right underneath the stove, and everyday dishes that are near the dishwasher, so unloading becomes an easy task. Knives and cutting boards, they go in a prep zone. Mugs belong by the coffee. When everything lives exactly where it needs to be, the kitchen almost runs itself. We stop crossing the room hundreds of times, and that kind of thoughtfulness, invisible efficiency is that separation between a well-designed kitchen and the one that just looks pretty. When I'm planning the kitchen, I mentally walk through the whole day, from our clients' morning coffee routine to the weekend dinners and late glass of wine. And I make sure that each thing has a moment, has a place, and where things are happening. And let me stay on that morning coffee for just a second. A small beverage zone is my favorite part of the plan. When the coffee machine and the mugs and the beans and the water source all live together off the main working core, the first person up can make their coffee without stepping into someone that's cooking. It takes the pressure of the whole kitchen at the busiest moments. And let's not waste those awkward spots. Every kitchen has them. A corner in a particular tend to be in the dark, forgotten dead zone. But with the right hardware, the corner drawer, the pull-out, well-designed Lazy Susan, the same corner can become the most useful storage in your kitchen. The same goes for those narrow gaps between the refrigerator. They're perfect for trays and baking sheets. Now, if you use every single inch of your kitchen, it will make it truly custom. And that's often the difference between the kitchen that feels generous and well-designed and the one that always feels like there's not enough space in the kitchen. Now, two things that live inside the layout that almost no one plans early enough, and both are farly harder to fix later. And those are lighting. Because the layout isn't where the cabinets go, it's where the light lands. I want bright, shadow-free lighting directly over my prep zone and the sink, which usually means a delegated light under the cabinets and over the island, aimed exactly where I'm working, where a client is working. In some kitchen, you cannot even see a cutting board, and that's frustrating. The second is the power. Here's where the outlets, and are they delegated to the right place? Are there enough outlets for the coffee machine, for the toaster, where these objects will actually sit? Do we have enough places to plug them in? Getting the lighting and the power right is invisibly, but if it's done improperly, you will actually notice it. And through all of this, let's design a kitchen of how you actually work. It's not a generic idea. A serious baker, well, they need more cooling space at the countertop and a bigger mixer. Someone who entertains constantly needs an island and a beverage zone to really take the traffic flow away from the cooking zone. A busy family might need a homework-friendly island and a snack that kids can reach out and grab. There's no one perfect layout. There's a layout that's perfect the way you live. So I always start there with a real daily life of how people cook. Before I draw a single cabinet, I want to know how my clients cook. How many hands are going to be in the kitchen at once? What is the morning routine? And how does your evening look like? One last important piece, because kitchens rarely stand alone anymore. In most homes, it opens right into the living room or a dining room space. So the layout has to be considered of the whole flow. I think about how the cook is standing and what they see, so they can be part of the conversation in the next room while they're working, facing their guests instead of the wall. I think about sightlines too, keeping the mess and the working side a little tucked away so the view from the sofa stays calm even in mid-dinner. And I keep the transition between the spaces open and easy. When the layout honors the connection, the kitchen truly becomes the center of everything. So let's bring it all together. When we design a kitchen, a zone, instead of just the triangle, giving the prep real space, keeping the core tight, the layout of the natural order of cooking, leaving generous clearance between our cabinets, planning for more than one cook. Place the island intentionally. Plan the light and the power early and store everything where you're going to use it. We end up with something wonderful. A kitchen that works beautifully. We stop noticing how it works. One where cooking feels calm and easy and even enjoyable. And none of that comes from spending more. It comes from getting the bones right. Here's the truth about the kitchen. The finishes are the things we notice first, but the layout is what we live with. A beautiful kitchen that fights us every day will never feel like a pleasure. A well laid out kitchen, even a simple one, feels effortless and dedicated. So let's give ourselves the bones that make everything else work for us. So here's what I'd love. Stand in your kitchen and make a mental walkthrough of how you prep your meals in your head. Where do you backtrack? Where do you feel cramped? Tell me in the comments if your layout is fighting you and where it's fighting you the most. And if what you're picturing is an actual renovation, not just a thought exercise. This is exactly the layout and the work that our team does every day at ARIID Group. Reach out to us and let us work and help you with your kitchen layout. And when you do comment, I do read those. So don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.